So we're going to get started with our original photograph, our original stock photograph. As you can see, I have my original photo here, which I'm going to use for reference to paint the face and hair. Also, I have the sketch that I did using the photo. I took a photo of this and uploaded it to Photoshop so that I could take this and I'm going to paint over it with my Photoshop paintbrush. So I have these palettes here. I have the layers palette, which if it is not up on your screen right now, you can go to Windows and click on layers and that'll pop up. I move it over to the corner here. Also, what I want is my color palette. And right now we have the color presets. You can get this palette also from Window if you click on swatches. Okay, so now that you have those two up, we're ready to go. These colors are great, but I'd like to have a little better selection. We could paint the portrait with the colors that are here on the preset, but if we have a little bit of a better selection, it'll make things a little quicker for us. So I'm going to pull my swatches palette over to the center here, and up in the corner you're going to find this little arrow. And I'm going to click on that little arrow. And what we have down here towards the bottom are all our color presets. So these are little color menus that we have. The one that I'm going to choose is Pantone Solid to Process. And it's just under Pantone Solid to Process Euro if this goes off your screen. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to hit OK. And you will see that it just loaded all these wonderful colors. So all of these colors, you can see I have my brights up here. I have my more muted colors down here. All of these are wonderful for skin tone. Look at these down here. Really fantastic. So I'm going to make that a little bit smaller so it fits down here at the bottom again. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to my more neutral colors. And I think, let's see what we have here. I like this range right here, so I'm going to get started with that. Let's try this color. Let's get my paintbrush here in my tools palette. And if you want, you can move this off to the side. I'm going to keep it up here just so that you can see why I'm choosing the colors I'm choosing. So I'm going to click on the paintbrush here. And up here we have the brush sizes. So if I click on this little arrow, I can choose any one of these brushes. Now you can see if you choose these here with the harder edges, when you apply the color, you're going to get a harder line. We don't want the harder line just yet. We're going to save that for the detail in the later part of the tutorial. So right now I want to choose one of these softer brushes. And for now, I think a 35 or a 45 will be great. So let's start with a 35. And we can just click on this and that'll close right up. We have opacity here, and this is the one that I really want you to pay attention to because this is hugely important when I paint a digital portrait. To really pay attention to how hard or soft the brush pressure is. I want to start out maybe somewhere kind of in the middle. Let's start with maybe a 45 opacity. So you can see if I paint it now and I go over that sketch line, you can still see the sketch. Okay, that's really important. So I'm just going to erase what I just did because we went over the lines there. I'm going to zoom in on this just a little bit so that I can see the face. There we go. Okay, so the first thing we want to do before we start painting is we want to create a new layer because if we paint on this original background layer that you can see here, there's a lock on it. If we paint on that, whatever we do is pretty much on that layer, and we won't be able to see the original sketch anymore. So if we go up here to this little arrow, just like we did on our swatches palette, if we click on this little arrow here, we can go down to New Layer and click that, and a window will pop up and ask you if this is what you want it to be called. You can name this. I'm going to call it, let's say, underpainting. And hit OK. And you can see our underpainting layer is right here. Okay. Now what I can do is I can take my paintbrush, I can start painting, and you can see that it's over the sketch. But if I turn this layer off, this underpainting layer off, my sketch is still exactly the way it was before. So this is almost like a piece of tracing paper over the original sketch that we're painting on. Okay, so this is very important. We really want to keep this original sketch preserved. Okay, so I'm going to go back and you can see that it's gray. That means it's active. That's the layer that I'm working on. If this is highlighted, then I'm actually working on the background layer. We want to avoid that completely. So let's just always make sure that our underpainting layer is clicked. So here I go. I'm going to start laying in my color just very quickly. I'm not going to fuss too much about it. And something really important that I want you to remember is I want you to go over the edge of the hairline. If we go around the hair very kind of neatly and outline it like this, what's going to happen is we're going to outline the hair very perfectly, and then we're going to come in and do the hair, and we're going to have a little disconnect between the skin and the hair. It's not going to look natural. If we look at this photo, we see her skin passes under the hair that's falling over the side of her face. That looks natural because her skin is lying underneath. We want the skin of the painting to lie underneath the painted hair. So always go over the hairline. Okay, we see a little scalp in here. So we want to add that to the painting. We're just doing a thin layer. It's transparent. So we're not losing anything in the sketch. Again, if we turn this off, your sketch is there. So don't worry about it. We're not messing anything up. You still have everything preserved. Okay, but we're just going to go in here. Let's raise our brush size to, let's do a 65. And let's just get some color laid in here. We're not going to worry too much about staying in all the lines perfectly. It doesn't matter right now. We're just going to get some color down on our sketch. Okay, and you can see if I go over an area more than once, it's going to start to overlap. Okay. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to take my darks or my darker color. We're going to start with this brown here. Let's see how this does. Let's lower our brush size back down to the 35. Our opacity, let's take that down a little to like 26. And what we're going to do is we're going to start adding in these kind of shadow areas of the portrait. Anywhere you see a shadow, let's start to bring those in. And you'll see that you'll start to get a little definition on the portrait itself, on her skin, on her bone structure. We'll start to feel placement of muscles and creases and wrinkles and anything like that. So we're just going to start defining things a little. And again, these are the under layers, so we're not going to see a lot of this in the end. Okay, we're just kind of defining things, mapping things out right now. We're not going to fuss about it too much. Okay, we're going to get all those layers laid in. Okay, and again, I'm not too worried about what ends up on the other side of the sketch. Okay, of the face. If I want to be really neat about it, I can come back in and look how easy it is to erase that with the eraser tool. And again, if you need to, you can change the brush size of the eraser tool. I can make that a little smaller and get some little details in there. Okay, we're going to go back to the paintbrush. We're going to raise our brush size maybe to a 65. And we're going to do, actually, let's go a little bit higher. Let's do 100. And we're just going to get the bottom of that cheek. And we're going to base in the ear. We always want to do the ear, the neck, anything close or connected to the face. If she has maybe a hand up to her cheek, we want to do that at the same time so that the colors work together and we can tell it's part of the same person or the same body. So just with the large brush, I'm just kind of blocking in the shadow areas. Okay? Okay, now that I have kind of a basic outline of what's going on in the face here in terms of light and dark, I'm just going to keep building. And I think I'm going to come over here to these kind of mauve colors. I think those are really nice, and I think we could get a nice base of probably like cheek color in there. There's a lot of pink in her face. Beautiful skin tones. And just very softly, we still have the large brush. We're kind of adding those in there. And what you can see is as I start to do this very kind of abrupt color change from this darker kind of sienna brown to this light peach is beginning to blend together. So because this pink color or this mauve color is between the two, it merges them very nicely. So I can just continue wherever she needs a little bit of that softer color. She needs a little pink in her skin tone. We can add that in. And the skin tones are always very warm. And we want to apply that warmth in this pink and the siennas early on. If we don't, she's going to start to look really pasty, and we want to stay away from the pasty skin unless we're doing a pasty character, and in which case we change our color palette entirely. So right now, her ear looks a little bit disconnected because it doesn't have that peach that we used earlier in it. So I think it was this color. We're going to add that in really quick. We're going to use probably that 35 brush again. And we're just going to get that in there so that it looks like it's part of the face. And there we go. I mean, that's pretty much all you need to do. We don't have to fuss with it too much. Again, we're not getting fussy just yet. There'll be plenty of time for fussy details later. Okay. So basically, we're just laying in everything now. And I mean, you can see with every step that we do, we get a little bit more definition in some part of the face, and that's what we want. Let's come over here to let's try this color. It's a little bit lighter mauve. Let's go back to our 100 brush, which was working very nicely, and see what we can do over here. That's actually really nice and soft. It might be a little bit too light. So if you go a little bit too light, I'm going to show you what we can do about that. Let's lay this in though, now that we've started. We don't need a lot of it. The pressure is at 26. We could even go maybe down to like a 16. Let's try that. Let's see what we can do. I'm just going to lay it in a couple areas. Okay, so as you can see, the whole face is starting to have this really soft, focused glow to it. Really nice. If that's the effect that you're after, we can of course do that at the end. But if we continue like this, then her whole face is going to be a little bit too out of focus. And this photograph has a nice, soft, out of focus edge on it. But we really want to make sure that we get all these nice details in here. You know, we want to be able to see these little eyelashes and the highlights on her nose. So the soft focus is really nice to get these colors blended. But we really want to get these details in. So we don't want to do too much soft focus. So what we're going to do is we're going to lower this brush size again. Let's go to a 45 this time. Let's get those lips based in. Let's try this color here, still in that mauve tone or hue. And let's get those painted in. Oh, we can raise that opacity. Again, you see how important the opacity is, how often I use it. Let's lower the brush size just a little. Let's try 27. So we get the arc of the lip. And that was a little sloppy, but that's okay. We might even want to take this color up into parts of the nose. Let's lower the opacity because we want a little bit of the transparency. I'm going to get rid of that stroke that I just did. I'm going to add a little bit of this color to the nose. I'm going to lower the opacity a little. And you can see how just making the connection between those two hues there, the nose and the lips with this pink is just a really nice, it's a really nice touch. It brings them together a little bit more. So I'll take the color up to the eyes a little, and I think we could probably go maybe a little more intense. Let's try the darkest color of this mauve hue and see what we get with that. That's pretty nice. Okay. What I'm going to do, because I have this color on my brush right now, just like with the hairline we talked about earlier, I really want to make sure that I put that skin tone under the eyebrows. And I think the pink is really nice to use. It's not too dark. It's kind of a nice, not intense, but it's a little more saturated. And I like to use the more saturated colors underneath sometimes, just because we're using the transparencies. It gives everything a nice glow. And I think it looks better overall in the end. I use this a lot in street painting. I like to put the most intense, the most saturated colors underneath and then work up to the lights. And a lot of artists work dark to light, which I do also, but just adding, you know, that very intense red and then building the lights on top in transparencies, I think it really makes a huge difference. So that's what we're doing now. I'm just going to add in a few darks here and there. We might even lower the brush size a little bit and get the edge of the nose in. Let's draw that in. Okay. Before we move on to any darker darks or highlights, I think we should get those eyes painted in. So we have all the surface areas, at least with one layer of color. So really important with eyes is, even if the whites of the eye look white, we're not going to use white. We're always going to use some sort of a gray. And I think with hers right now, let's start with this kind of, it's almost a greenish gray. Let's start with this one here. And we're going to paint that in. I think my brush size is okay. Okay, so you can see I'm painting this on. It's not white, but it could pass as white against her skin tone. It's all relative. Her skin tone obviously is darker than the white of the eye on the photograph. So if we go in and put that brightest white, it's going to look really weird. It's not going to look right. We need to start with the darker colors first. And I think I'm going to go a little bit darker. I could even go probably with a warmer gray, I should say. Let's see what we have up here. Let's try these. Let's see what these do. And again, because this eye is turning the corner, we can go a little bit darker. And I think that's nice. I think that works well. And again, don't worry if you go over the eyelid accidentally. We can go over that again. We have the colors here. Let's do the brown of the eye next. Let's try this dark green color. Her eyes here are brown. Doesn't mean you have to paint the brown if you'd like to. That's up to you, but I'm gonna experiment a little. Let's try working with the green first. Let's get that based in. Again, I'm not being too messy. If I really wanted to be very specific about the eye placement, the pupil placement, everything like that, I would zoom in a little bit closer and be very careful about it. But right now, it's the underpainting. I'm just basing it in. So now we have a nice base for our eyes. That's working well for me. I think what we could do next is get a little bit of the pupil in. And I'm not ever going to go with black immediately. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with probably, let's use a darker brown and a more muted brown. Let's try this one down here. I think that'll work well. Basically, I'm just gonna dot that in like so. Again, it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. That's not important at this point. We want the base. And this is almost the right size for the pupil, so I'm just kind of laying it in there, a couple strokes. There we go. I think the last thing I'm going to do on this is maybe take this same color and I'm going to get a little bit of a ridge on this eye in there. Again, not fussing too much, just a little bit of a ridge. It's really important that we get definition early on so that we keep the shape of things ahead of time. And then we're going to lighten the opacity. We're going to use the same color and just give a little definition to this eyebrow and the edge of the lid. And you can see it's just darkening things ever so slightly. Great. Okay, very good so far. Basically, the goal now is to continue building these layers until it's no longer transparent. This is what we have now if we take away this sketch. Okay, you can see that having the sketch underneath is really defining the face right now. We have these colors on here, which are really starting to build up the three-dimensional quality of the face, but we really need the sketch right now to make this work. So what the goal is to continue building these layers so that we don't need the sketch anymore. And so we're going to keep building those. We're going to keep building these flesh tones right now. Okay, so continuing with our layers, we're just going to continue to build up our colors. I'm going to come down here, kind of this almost an ochre mustardy brown. And I'm going to raise the size of my brush again. Let's try a 45, actually 65. And I'm going to add a little of the ochre in here. And again, you can see that just using this ochre at a very low opacity blends these colors together. The kind of darker sienna and the lighter pink that we had here. And with any skin tone, we always want to have the ochres, we want to have the pinks, the mauves, even tones of blues and greens. We want the cooler shades to really round the form. So I'm just adding in these yellow tones. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab this kind of taupey color. And let's see what that does. That's actually too light. So I'm going to do in Control Z and get rid of that. And let's try and do our cool green right now. Let's see. Let's try this olive right now, which is very similar to the color we used on the eyes. We're going to take our opacity down just a bit. We want to be extra safe with this because it's so different from what we have right now. I think the size of our brush is okay. We're going to do a little bit. You can see over here, just under the eyes, it gets a little bit darker and a little bit cooler. Also, this side of the cheek gets a little bit cooler too. We're going to start with the olive green and then we're going to build on top of that. We're going to see how this goes. The other side of the top of the lip here gets a little bit green, okay, a little bit cooler. So we're going to try and add this in very lightly right now. We're going to cool these areas off. If we add too much color, it's okay. We can always go back over it. Remember, we're layering. We're layering everything. I'm going to lower the brush to a 35. I'm going to do the eye socket here. And I actually like that much better already, just adding these cool colors in here. Always include the ear. I'm adding those cools. Okay, and then we have some down here under the chin. On this side of the mouth area. A little over the nose. And we're just continuing to build. And under the eye here. Okay, so far we're doing pretty well. Let's go back to up to a larger brush. Let's try 100. And we're going to just kind of glaze over this side of the forehead. Okay, now you see how this side is hitting the light and it's rounding to the shadow side. It's exactly what we want. Okay, let's come back over to our warm colors. I'm going to come back over here to what we originally used, which were the kind of in the sienna hue. I'm going to try this color. I'm going to keep the same 100 brush, and let's see what we have here. Okay, and you can see that I'm going over the green that I just put in. That's fine. We're just warming it up a bit, just to kind of blend it in with what we already have. And right after we do this, we're going to go in with a little more detailed work. We're going to start to really cover up this sketch underneath.